What happens when a seasoned journalist decides she's had enough of royal privilege and calls out a prince on live television? Well, you're about to find out because what unfolded on The View was nothing short of explosive. Before we dive into this incredible confrontation, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because, trust me, you're going to want to discuss this one. The studio lights were blazing as Megyn Kelly settled into the guest host chair, her signature, confidence radiating across the set. She had been invited to co-host for a special episode focusing on media accountability and public figures. Little did anyone know that Prince Harry would be walking into what would become one of the most uncomfortable interviews of his life. Our next guest needs no introduction, announced Whoopi Goldberg, though there was a slight tension in her voice. He's here to discuss his latest charitable initiative and his ongoing relationship with the media. Please welcome Prince Harry. The audience applauded as Harry walked onto the set, his usual composed demeanor intact. He settled into the interview chair with practiced ease, flashing that familiar smile that had charmed millions. But Megyn Kelly wasn't smiling back. "Prince Harry, welcome to The View," Kelly began, her tone professional, but noticeably cool. "I have to say it's interesting timing for this appearance given some of the recent statements you've made about media responsibility." Harry shifted slightly, perhaps sensing the undercurrent. "Thank you for having me, Megyn. Yes, I think it's more important than ever to have these conversations about how the media operates and the impact it has on real people's lives." "Real people's lives," Kelly repeated, leaning forward slightly. "That's fascinating coming from someone who has made a career out of selling those very personal stories to the highest bidder. Tell me, how do you reconcile advocating for privacy while simultaneously writing tell-all books and giving explosive interviews?" The studio fell silent. This wasn't the softball interview Harry had been expecting. Joy Behar looked uncomfortable while Sarah and glanced nervously between the two. Harry's smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered. "I think there's a difference between controlling your own narrative and having it controlled by others. Megyn, when you've been lied about, when your family has been attacked, sometimes you have to set the record straight." "Set the record straight?" Kelly nodded, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I sit, it looks more like a systematic campaign to damage your own family for profit. You've accused them of racism, of cutting you off financially, of refusing to protect your wife. Yet here you are, still using your royal title, still trading on the very institution you claim mistreated you." The tension in the studio was palpable. Cameras captured every micro-expression as Harry's jaw tightened. "I think you're oversimplifying. A very complex situation, Megyn. The institution and the family are two different things." "Are they?" Kelly shot back. "Because you seem to conflate them whenever it's convenient for your narrative. Your grandmother, who you claim to have loved deeply, was the head of that institution. Your father, who you've publicly criticized, is now the head of that institution. So, when you attack the monarchy, you're attacking them personally, aren't you?" Harry's composure was beginning to crack. "That's not fair, Megyn. You're twisting my words?" "I'm using your words," Kelly replied coolly. "Your exact words from multiple interviews and your book. You can't have it both ways, Prince Harry. You can't claim to want privacy while giving interview after interview. You can't claim to want to protect your family while publicly airing their private conversations. And you certainly can't claim to be a victim while living in a multi-million-dollar mansion and signing lucrative media deals." The other hosts exchanged glances, clearly unsure whether to intervene. Whoopi finally jumped in. "Megyn, I think we should let Harry respond." But Kelly wasn't finished. "Oh, I want him to respond. I want him to explain to the mothers watching the show, the single mothers, the women working 2 jobs to make ends meet, how someone who is born into unimaginable privilege, who has never wanted for anything, can position himself as a victim of circumstance." Harry's face was flushed now, his royal training wearing with his obvious frustration. "You don't know what it was like growing up in that environment, Megyn. You don't know what it's like to lose your mother to the very media you're defending. To watch your wife be torn apart by the same machine." "You're right," Kelly acknowledged, but her tone remained unforgiving. "I don't know what it's like to be born into royalty. But I do know what it's like to work for everything I have. I know what it's like to face media scrutiny and criticism without having a team of publicists and a multi-million-dollar platform to fight back. And I know what accountability looks like. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Harry looked around the table, perhaps hoping for support from the other hosts, but found only uncomfortable faces. Accountability, Harry repeated, his voice rising slightly. Let's talk about accountability, Megyn. Let's talk about the media's accountability for my mother's death, for the racist coverage of my wife, for the lies and distortions that have been printed about my family for decades. Kelly's eyes lit up at this opening. Your mother's death was a tragedy, and no one disputes that. But using her death as a shield for your own choices, for your own actions, that's not honoring her memory. That's exploiting it. And as for your wife, she was a working actress who dated a prince and became a duchess. Media attention comes with that territory. You knew that. She knew that. Everyone knew that. She didn't deserve the treatment she received. Harry insisted, his voice tight with emotion. No one deserves unfair treatment, Kelly agreed. But life isn't fair, Prince Harry. And instead of handling it with grace and dignity like your grandmother did for 70 years, like your father has done, like your brother is doing, you chose to burn it all down. And now you want sympathy for the consequences of your own choices. Harry's hands clenched in his lap, his royal composure completely abandoned. Now you think you know everything, don't you, Megyn? You sit here in your ivory tower, passing judgment on people you've never met, situations you've never experienced. Kelly's eyebrows raised, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Ivory tower. That's rich coming from someone who literally lived in palaces. But you're right about one thing. I do pass judgment. It's called journalism, and it's what I've built my career on. Unlike some people, I didn't inherit my platform. You have no idea what kind of pressure I was under. Harry shot back, his voice cracking slightly, the constant scrutiny, the impossible expectations. Watching my wife struggle with suicidal thoughts because of the treatment she received. The studio audience gasped audibly at this revelation, but Kelly didn't flinch. Those are serious allegations, Prince Harry. And if true, they deserve compassion and proper mental health support, but using them as a cudgel to beat your family with publicly, that's not seeking help, that's seeking revenge. Joy Behar finally found her voice. Megyn, maybe we should focus on Harry's charitable work. But Kelly waved her off. No, Joy, this is exactly the kind of softball treatment that's enabled this behavior. Prince Harry came on this show to promote himself and his causes while positioning himself as a victim. I think the audience deserves to hear some hard truths. Harry leaned forward, his eyes flashing with anger. Hard truths? You want hard truths, Megyn? The hard truth is that the British press killed my mother, and they were trying to do the same thing to my wife. The hard truth is that my own family threw us to the wolves to protect themselves. Your mother chose to get in that car, Kelly replied bluntly, causing audible gasps from the audience. She chose to not wear a seatbelt. She chose to be with a man who is driving recklessly. Yes, the paparazzi were pursuing them, and yes, that was wrong. But at some point, personal responsibility has to enter the equation. Harry's face went white, then red. How dare you? How dare you sit there and blame my mother for her own death? I'm not blaming her, Kelly clarified. Her voice steady despite the explosive atmosphere. I'm pointing out that life is complicated, that tragedy often involves multiple factors, and that turning your mother into a political weapon to justify your own choices dishonors her memory. Whoopi tried to interject again. Maybe we should take a commercial break. No, Harry said firmly, his voice shaking with rage. I want to finish this. You think you're so clever, Megyn, with your gotcha questions and your superior attitude, but you're just another media parasite feeding off other people's pain for your own gain. Kelly's smile widened. There it is. The real Prince Harry, the polished, media-trained royal, not the grieving son, not the protective husband, just an entitled man-child who can't handle being challenged. You know what the difference is between us, Prince Harry? When I'm criticized, when I'm attacked, when I make mistakes, I don't write a book about it. I don't go on a global media tour. I don't blame my family. I take responsibility, and I move on. You have no idea what you're talking about. Harry sputtered clearly, losing control of the narrative he'd expected to control. Don't I? Kelly leaned back in her chair, completely in command. Now, let me tell you what I see. I see a man who had everything handed to him, who had a platform to do incredible good in the world. And instead of rising to that challenge, instead of honoring the legacy he inherited, he chose to tear it all down because he couldn't handle sharing the spotlight with his brother. This has nothing to do with William, Harry protested. But his voice was pathetic. The audience was completely silent now. The tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Harry looked around the table, his eyes wild, clearly searching for an ally or an escape route. You know what, Megyn? Harry said finally, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You're everything that's wrong with modern media. You're cruel. You're heartless. And you're exactly the kind of person who made my life hell growing up. Kelly nodded thoughtfully. And you, Prince Harry, are everything that's wrong with modern celebrity culture. You want all the benefits of fame without any of the responsibilities. You want sympathy without accountability. You want to be seen as a victim while living like a king. The words hung in the air like a challenge thrown down at dawn. Harry's face cycled through emotions, rage, hurt, disbelief, before settling into something cold and calculating. He slowly sat back down, his movements deliberate and controlled. You want to play this game, Megyn? Harry said quietly, his voice taking on a tone none of them had heard before. Fine, let's talk about accountability. Let's talk about your accountability. How many lives have you destroyed with your reporting? How many families have you torn apart for ratings? Kelly's confident demeanor flickered for just a moment. I report the truth, Prince Harry. Something you seem allergic to. Harry laughed bitterly. Is that what you call it when you spend weeks attacking a grieving family? When you turn tragedy into entertainment? You talk about my mother like she was some reckless teenager instead of a woman being hunted by photographers who saw her as nothing but a commodity. Your mother was a grown woman who made choices, Kelly insisted. But there was less fire in her voice. Now, my mother was 36 years old, Harry continued, his voice gaining strength. She was trying to find happiness after a marriage that was destroyed by an institution that cared more about appearances than people. She was being stalked, harassed, and commodified every single day of her life. And when she died, people like you turn it into a story, into content, into something to be analyzed and dissected for public consumption. Whoopi leaned forward. Harry, I think we all understand your pain. Do you? Harry turned to her, his eyes blazing because Megyn here just told a national television audience that my mother was responsible for her own death. She sat there comfortable in her chair and reduced one of the most traumatic events in modern royal history to a lesson about personal responsibility. Kelly shifted uncomfortably. I didn't say she was responsible. I said multiple factors were involved. You said she chose to get in that car. Harry fired back. You said she chose not to wear a seatbelt. You reduced her final moments to a series of bad choices instead of acknowledging that she was running for her life from the very media machine you represent. The audience was completely captivated now watching this role reversal as Harry found his footing and Kelly began to look less certain. And, you want to talk about my book, my interviews? Harry continued, his voice building momentum. At least I'm telling my own story. At least I'm speaking my own truth instead of letting others define me. You've made a career out of telling other people's stories. Often without their permission. Often without their consent. Joy Behar tried to lighten the mood. Well, that's what journalists do, Harry. Is it? Harry turned to her. Is that what journalism is? Because I thought journalism was supposed to be about holding power accountable, about speaking truth to authority. Instead, what I see is a media ecosystem that protects the powerful and attacks the vulnerable, that turns human suffering into entertainment. Kelly found her voice again. You're not vulnerable, Prince Harry. You're one of the most privileged people alive. Privilege doesn't protect you from pain, Harry shot back. Privilege doesn't protect you from loss. Privilege doesn't protect you from watching a woman you love contemplate suicide because of the treatment she's receiving. You think money and titles make you immune to human suffering. I think they give you resources that most people don't have, Kelly replied. But her earlier confidence was gone. Resources? Harry's voice rose again. What resources? A family that leaked stories about me to protect themselves. An institution that hung my wife out to dry. A media that turned every aspect of our lives into content. Tell me, Megyn, what resources should I have used when my wife was getting death threats? When she was being called names I won't repeat on television? When she was being compared to my mother in the cruelest possible ways? The studio was dead quiet. Even the camera operators seemed frozen in place. You want to know why I wrote that book? Harry continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Because for 38 years, other people have been writing my story. Other people have been deciding who I am, what I think, what I feel. And most of those people have never met me, never spoken to me, never cared about me as a human being. Kelly tried to regain control. But surely you understand that public figures are subject to scrutiny. Scrutiny?
Yes.
Harry nodded. But what happened to my wife? What happened to my mother? That wasn't scrutiny. That was harassment. That was abuse. And the fact that you can't see the difference, the fact that you think it's acceptable because we're royal, that tells me everything I need to know about you and the industry you represent. Sarah Ann looked visibly moved. Harry, I think a lot of people don't realize the human cost of fame. That's exactly right, Harry said, turning to her gratefully. Everyone sees the palaces and the titles and the ceremonies. Don't see the children crying because their father is being attacked in the press. They don't see sleepless nights, the security concerns, the way every normal human moment becomes a potential scandal. Kelly made one last attempt to regain the upper hand.
But you chose to stay in the public eye.
You could have stepped back quietly. Harry turned back to her, and for a moment his expression was almost pitying. Could I, Megyn? Could I really? Because every time I tried to step back, every time I tried to find privacy, the media followed. Every time I tried to protect my family, you found new ways to intrude. The only choice you gave me was to control my own narrative or let you control it for me. So, you chose profit, Kelly said weakly. I chose survival, Harry corrected. I chose to tell my story before you could twist it beyond recognition. I chose to define myself before you could define me. And clearly, based on your reaction today, that was the right choice. Whoopi finally stepped in decisively. I think we need to wrap this up, but Harry wasn't finished. No, Whoopi. Let me finish. Megyn came here today thinking she was going to expose me, thinking she was going to tear me down in front of your audience. Instead, she's exposed herself. She's shown everyone exactly what I've been talking about. The cruelty, the lack of empathy, the willingness to use other people's pain for entertainment. He stood up again, but this time with dignity rather than anger. I came here to talk about my charitable work, about the causes I care about making a positive difference in the world. Instead, I got attacked, dismissed, and had my mother's death used as a weapon against me. If that's what passes for journalism today, then maybe the problem isn't with the people being interviewed. Harry looked directly into the camera. To anyone watching who has ever felt attacked, dismissed, or misunderstood by the media, I want you to know that your pain is valid. Your story matters, and you have the right to tell it yourself. He turned back to the panel. Thank you for having me, even if it wasn't the conversation any of us expected. As Harry walked off the set, the studio remained in stunned silence. Kelly sat frozen in her chair, clearly processing what had just happened. The other hosts exchanged glances, unsure how to proceed. Finally, Whoopi found her voice. Well, that was certainly something. We'll be right back after this commercial break. As the cameras cut away, the audience remained silent, still absorbing the intensity of what they had just witnessed. It was clear that nobody, least of all Megyn Kelly, had expected the interview to end with Prince Harry walking away as the victor. That's a wrap on this incredible confrontation that nobody saw coming. What did you think about Harry's comeback? Did Megyn Kelly go too far? Or was she just doing her job? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And make sure to subscribe for more explosive celebrity moments like this one.